Today, I'm so happy to welcome my return guest, Jennifer O'Brien. Jennifer helps people start conversations about caregiving and end of life. In her 35 plus years in healthcare, she has been a practice management consultant to physicians and is the author of the book, The Hospice Doctor's Widow. This book she began as an art journal while caring for her husband, Bob Lemberg, a hospice and palliative care physician, and she worked on it for some time following his death. And we spoke about this book and her caregiving experience in my previous interview with Jennifer. But she has written a second book, Care Boss: Leadership Strategies and Resources for Family Caregivers, that we'll be discussing today. In this book, Jennifer packages all of her own experience as a caregiver, along with her leadership acumen and healthcare operational insights, into a quick, easy read that empowers family caregivers. And you can learn all about Jennifer's books at her website, jenniferaobrien.com. So, welcome back, Jennifer. It's good to see you again.
Oh, Karen, it's wonderful to be back with you.
I'm so glad we have a chance to catch up once more. And I wanted to start by giving a shout out to your first book, The Hospice Doctor's Widow, which is a beautiful art journal. I know there's a second edition of it out now, and also just to acknowledge, I want people to go back and listen to our first interview to hear the whole story, but to acknowledge that you started that book while you were a caregiver for your husband, Bob.
Yeah. I'm a self-taught collage artist, and I started teaching myself digital collage at about the time that Bob got sick. And so I started to create these collages and these art journal entries, mostly as a form of self-care, just a creative outlet. I also really wanted to document some of Bob's wisdom, right? Because we were having now to turn a lot of his experience and his wisdom and the way he had dealt with families. We were then turning that on ourselves. And that's such a unique perspective, that I wanted to document that so that I wouldn't forget it. So I didn't really create the journal with the intention of it becoming a book. Um, but as you referenced in my bio, I have a long history, a career in interim healthcare leadership, for large physician practices. And after Bob died, about a year after Bob died, I took an interim CEO position for a very large multi-specialty practice. And when I was working in that practice, a neurologist was in the process of diagnosing three patients with ALS, and he was telling me about it. So I brought my journal into him, just, hey, here's this thing I did when I was taking care of my husband who was dying. And he took it home and came back the next day and said, "You're not getting your journal back. I'm going to loan it to these patients, perhaps more importantly to their spouses, and you need to figure out how to get that published." And that came just at the time that I was starting to realize the weight of the grief was manageable, and I was really interested in potentially helping other people. And his work, like, that was just really compelling that he thought my journal would help others. So yeah, I went to work and found an independent, very, very small press that took a chance on it. And it's helped a lot of people. And recently, I did do a second edition. I changed publishers for the new book and for the second edition of The Hospice Doctor's Widow. So the new version of The Hospice Doctor's Widow has three basic changes to it. One is the subtitle is different. It's now called An Art Journal of Caregiving and Grief, because it used to just be a journal, and that was very confusing to people. They thought they were going to get a blank book where they were going to make their own journal and crazy stuff like that. So I augmented the subtitle to sort of clear things up. And then there's an incredibly just wonderful, well-written, of course, forward in it by Elizabeth Coplin, founder of the Grief Dialogues and Pulitzer nominee. And she likes the book a lot. she's always liked the book, and she was very honored when I asked her would she write a foreword. And then at the end, there are 9 additional art journal entries
Mm.
that were all created since the first edition came out. So they're all grief-based. They're all about kind of, you know, continuing to live on without Bob. And my father died in a couple years ago, so I'm on my own now. So that's kind of woven in there a little bit. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, it's such a beautiful piece of work. And I just want to say the art itself is so evocative and it's such a good way of conveying messages and wisdom to people, especially in a caregiving situation who don't have time to sit down and read something lengthy, to be able to look at a page that has just a small amount of text on it and have it hit you like, oh, wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear today. It's just the perfect thing. So it's a wonderful gift for people who know someone who's caregiving or grieving or
Or
both.
grieving, yes, especially a loss where the griever took care of their person. It's not a great book for like a sudden heart attack or automobile accident kind of loss, but it is a good book before or after the death of someone you are or have taken care of. Yeah.
And then following that book, you've written this new book, Care Boss, which is entirely different. And so,
Totally.
but it shows us your diversity and your skill in writing, but equally a very important and very helpful book in a completely different way. So I want to talk. This conversation will now be all about Care Boss and about what inspired you to write this book.
Yeah, thank you. So, when Hospice Doctor's Widow came out, I sort of got launched into this caregiving end of life advocacy space. And one of the other people who at the time was had amassed a following of about 100,000 family caregivers who were all millennials and Gen Z. This woman's name is Lucinda Koza. She is not doing that anymore because she had twins and she now does stuff about twins. But she had this rather large group because she was taking care of her dad. Lots of family caregivers are these younger generations. And one day she posted on her Instagram account, "Remember, you are the CEO of the situation." And I thought, well, she's right about that. That's totally true of a primary family caregiver role. It's a leadership position. And I, of course, as you said in the bio, have done all this interim leadership in healthcare. Um, so I thought, she's right. It's a leadership position, but I'll bet a lot of these caregivers and older caregivers don't have leadership experience, right?
Mhm.
So I do. I've been a serial caregiver for my mom, my husband, and my father. And I've been a serial CEO for these larger healthcare physician practices. And I can combine, I see the correlation, and I can not only take my leadership experience, resources, strategies, and ways, but I can I can offer that specific to caregiving, specific to healthcare. And so I was like, I have this. I need to share it with other family caregivers. So that's
It's
what it is.
it's interesting for me reading the book. It was an aha experience, even though I took care of my mom many years ago now, but reading the book, it was like, oh, if only I had had this mindset, if only I had known about this and thought about my role as a caregiver from this perspective, it would have been very helpful to me. So talk about just some of the similarities between being a CEO and being a caregiver.
Yeah. So there's two similarities between CEOing and family caregiving giving that surprises people. It surprises people that this is an issue for CEOs, and that is the studies that have shown that a certain majority of CEOs feel like they were ill prepared for the
Hmm.
job, and a similar over 50% feel isolated and lonely in their job. I have experienced both of those things in my career in leadership. Certainly the isolation, especially as a CEO, you are not a board member, you are not a staff person, you are a, one person who's trying to make all that work. Um, but you don't have alignment, you don't have a team, a, a friend, a colleague, someone who's kind of on your same level in the organization. And so the isolation and the feeling of kind of learning on the job and being ill prepared, those are similarities. From the caregiving standpoint, I totally contend that it's a leadership position because it requires you to have a perspective on, of a higher altitude. You have to get your altitude up. You have to get some objectivity involved. But you also have to make sure every detail goes right. And as a leader, I felt that those polls as well, the importance of that sort of, and the full range of kind of what happens in between those things. Um, I don't know if you're going to ask me about differences, but there are a couple of there
Sure.
are a couple
Sure.
of
Let's talk
differences.
about those.
Um, I'll just lead to the next question I want to answer. What there's the two biggest differences that I can see are one, um, the caregiver does it all. So when I'm in a clinic that I'm running, and there's a bio mess, right? I can call environmental services and someone will come and clean that up. And when you're the caregiver, you're going to clean that up. So,
Mm,
so that's a big difference. And that's an important difference to consider for caregivers, so that you are aware of when you're down in it versus when you've got a little chance and reason perhaps to get your altitude up and your perspective. Um, the second big difference is in the vision. In the book, I talk about the importance of, for leaders, there is an importance of what we call mission, vision, and values. Mission being what's your purpose, what you do now, like your reason for being as a either leader, caregiver, organization. And your vision is what you hope to be, what's out ahead, what you're hoping for. Um, in leading an organization, the vision is typically a cause for great celebration when you achieve it or you get closer to it. And there's a big difference in caregiving. Because the book offers the reader a chance to develop their own mission statement, vision statement, and of course core values. But with the mission and the vision, I offer what I think two good, a concise mission statement would be for a family caregiver, and vision statement. And the vision has to do with, a dignified, comfortable end of life for your care recipient, a smooth transition from caregiver to griever, and a life, for yourself beyond that, that is healthy from a spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical standpoint. That's what we're going toward. And getting there is not a happy, you know, eventually you will experience contentment again, and you will, but between here and there, what, visions are normally, like I said, cause for great celebration when they begin to be realized, and that's simply not the case in family caregiving.
mm. That makes sense. But I did find that portion of the book really interesting because I hadn't really thought of it as having like a vision statement when I took care of my mom. But she told me that what she wanted at the end of her life was to be at home when she died with me taking care of her. And that was our simple little vision of what would happen. But honestly, just that statement helped guide some of our decisions because at one point she was her doctor had suggested a surgery that was quite risky that she could have done. And when we realized like the odds of her having a complication or not never even surviving the surgery were pretty large, and that
Put the
would
vision at risk.
yeah, it would put the vision at risk. And the vision was was our kind of our guiding star. So we said no to the surgery because the vision was to go home. And it was really helpful to have that vision. It helped guide the decision. It helped take away all of the emotional angst around the decision because it actually gave a lot of clarity. Like this is really what we need to do there. It helped so much, and it took away like guilt I might have felt later for having chosen that because we followed the vision. We stayed true to
Right.
the vision.
Shared vision. Right, right. And that's why all three of those are so important because they are touchstones that you can come back to when things come up and you can kind of go back to wait, what's my mission here? What was and let's get back to that. Let's not, let's get back to what the mission is and stay within that. And if it's something that may affect the vision, then yeah, really helps to have established those.
Yeah. And in the chapter on team and resources, you do talk about the importance of having a team, even though, as you said, ultimately the buck stops with the caregiver's the one who may end up doing a lot of the challenging tasks. But we know that it's so important for caregivers to assemble a team if they can. And yet, at least I found it really hard to do. I could not think straight about who could help, what could they do, what do I need? And I felt like your book, it's just a really logical approach to figuring out those questions. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, that section is the longest. It's called Team and Resources, and it's the longest section in the book. Because there's just a lot to unpack there, right? First off, there's the word team, which quite frankly, when you're when you're the caregiver, you might roll your eyes and groan when you hear us talk about the word team, going, who are these broads and what are they thinking that I've got a team? No, I understand that you don't feel like you have a team. And I actually, even as a leader, separate from caregiving, I find the word team dubious in most ways people use it. It's especially annoying to me when other people in the family overuse that analogy, we're a team here, you're the quarterback, and you're going, yeah, you might see it that way, but I'm getting sacked and there's no one to pass to, like
You're not
it's
showing up for the
yeah,
games.
yeah. I've, so I think that analogy to the popular sports like football and basketball are a mistake because it's not that kind of a team. Um, if I tell in the book, if someone's insisting on using sports analogy, then I would suggest using more of like a gymnastics team or a ski team where each person, right, is bringing their best so that the team and the vision and the mission as a whole do well. So if that's the case, the other thing the book takes you through, the book has a lot of sort of workbook elements to it.
Hmm.
I not only want to present something to you, but I want to get you thinking about it, and then maybe even how does it apply in your life. So one thing that's important is you feel alone. There's no question about that. But if you really dig down and try to identify the helpers, you're not alone, right? For starters, there are doctors and there are nurses. I mean, right there, they're not necessarily family, but they are helpers. Like they are part of the group or the team. And so I take folks through how identifying the helpers and then spend some time on what might be an alternative way to look at how you organize your thoughts and your interactions with those different helpers and where they really help, are best at helping and not so best at helping. And then maybe there's even a layer of people who really aren't helpers, but it's incumbent upon you to communicate with them, to update them on what's happening. They're still a really important part of the people aspect of this endeavor. And then going into, some of the tricks of delegation that we all suffer from when you talked about not only just being clear-headed, but some really practical ways to say, here are these tasks, identify each of the tasks, and sort of look at what could be handed off, and still keep with the mission and the quality, why you might not be handing things off, right? Starts with the leader. I'm either a perfectionist or I'm proprietary, or I think it's going to take longer to explain this than it is for me to just do it, kind of thing. These are all the excuses that we all use for not delegating, and kind of trying to address those and be realistic about what you can do. And then some identifying people's styles. So, there are people who are motivated by social stuff, right? So they would be the person to put in charge of the upcoming birthday celebration, or that kind of thing. There are people who want a task and they want to be autonomous about it, so you just how to tell them here's what we're going to need and here's when I'm going to need it by, and kind of not let that go and work, and what types of tasks those are. So yeah, there's quite a bit in that section about how to organize your approach to people. And to me, the most powerful thing in a leader's toolkit in terms of motivating people, and even to some degree educating and training people, is what I call pinpointed positive feedback, or very specific, thank yous, that outline what was so effective about what they did. A, that individual will learn not just good job, but here's why it was a good job. And positive feedback, you can share that in front of other people. So if it's a family email, you can say that your brother, did this, this, and this, and it was effective because of this, this, and this. And then everyone is learning,
Mm.
right? What was effective about that. So that's one of the tools of people management that I think is just absolutely fundamental.
Hmm. That all makes so much sense. And again, reading this book in retrospect, I see, there were so many more helpers around than I realized at the time. And I was just too disorganized. It wasn't clear in my mind what I needed help with. So I couldn't recognize that there were people who could plug in, who could do some of those things and help out. But it makes sense to have read this book a little bit in advance, maybe in anticipation of the caregiving journey, to work some of that out. And I think all of us should be prepared. Any one of us may end up being a caregiver at any point during our lives. And these days, I mean, the statistics are really high of how many people right now are caregivers in the US.
And so, with the silver wave, it's just going to increase. The need is just going to increase. Yeah, I'm glad you said that about sort of the timing of reading this book. Um, I think the book is, I wrote the book, there's sections, and then within each section, there are subsections that are typically no more than 2 pages. It's a 6 by 9, it's a paperback, it's a quick read. And I tried to make it, and I think I succeeded at this, so that these subsections are a quick read, and you could just take one of them and kind of get what you can, because I was a caregiver and I know that reading a big long chapter book was out of the question while I was in the heavy duty throes of caregiving. Um, and the other thing to think about with that sort of reading it perhaps a little ahead of time is remembering lots of times caregiving doesn't, like, you don't go straight to hospice, right? Like
Mhm.
there's an incline that happens. It started perhaps 8 years ago with you taking your mom to a couple of doctor's appointments, and it just grew, right? So that if you're in that period where you're starting to help out with someone, and the chances are pretty good that they're going to need more and more help, then I think it's a great time to read this book. I think it's also, of course, a good time to read it when you're in it, but it's really good to get some perspective and to have it on hand as things get more intense.
Mhm. I really think so too, because that's, as you said, one of the biggest complaints of caregivers is having no training and not being prepared. And this isn't so much the hands-on training of how you turn someone, but it's really teaching you how to think and how to organize the tasks that you have to do. And that's where it all has to begin, is with your mindset and your thought process and how you look at everything. And since caregiving is such an emotion driven task, it's helpful to have kind of a logic based approach that helps us, like you said, get that step back, get a higher perspective that's more just logical, down to earth. This is what we need to take care of. These are the things we need to do, and this is the best way to get that accomplished.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so I think that really speaks to self-care too, which you have a whole chapter on self-management, and you talk to that also, because again, that's so many caregivers are not really able to do positive things for themselves because they feel so overwhelmed by the
Yeah,
tasks that they're doing. And so we just have to be teaching people how to work with that and how to build in some of that care. And I know you said you hate the term self-care because it's kind of been overused.
yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, I don't hate the term. It's just it's gotten diluted, I think. And to, to mean a mani-pedi and a piece of chocolate cake. Not like, listen, I'm the first one to sign up for a piece of chocolate cake. But that's, that's not the kind of, that's not what's needed for the long haul of family caregiving. The average duration of family caregiving is 4.5 years. Um, it's going to take more than a mani-pedi and a piece of chocolate cake, or even an entire chocolate cake, right? To get through that. This is more self-management, self-awareness. Um, and the other thing I don't like about the term self-care is that in its overuse, something that I call self-care shaming has, in my opinion, arisen. This whole, well, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of him. And it's like, please, really? Like I didn't know that, because pretty much know that, you're not helping, and you're making it worse, right? Because now I feel that much more so load on me that, yeah, I should be doing anytime. I don't think, honestly, I don't think you should ever say the word should to a family caregiver.
mm.
I call it bullshould, right? Like that, the only people I think who are allowed to say that to family caregivers is nurses and doctors, and most of them wouldn't say that, right? They see that what's more important is you to understand why this is important, not just a, hey, you should do this, right? So the only people I think who could do that often don't. And then the folks who really have no business doing that are the ones who are doing it. So yeah. Yeah, but there's a nice section on self-management. I tried to take it from the very practical, as simple as, have you eaten? When I tend to get worked up, Bob used to say all the time, I don't let myself get too hungry. I don't let myself I get hydrate, and just those two, and they seem like basic, but when you are in the middle of some stuff, it is really, sometimes I'm like, wait, when did I eat last? And I think that, it starts with some really basic stuff like that and then goes through all the way to how can we make hobbies or interests doable within the caregiving realm, right? Because may not be practical to plan and train for the Chicago Marathon when you're deep into caregiving for someone, because that all takes a lot of, time away. But there are things you can do to give yourself a little something in terms of exercise, maybe planning that for later on, when you are able to get away to do that after as the vision is being realized or has been realized. So some practical stuff, and even with hobbies, what are the kinds of, how I have reduced some of my art stuff to small, short, manageable little ways of doing things when I didn't have the time and the space, to do the full deal.
Mm. That's just really practical and and so helpful as well. And I know you have some tools in that chapter. There's one I just wanted to ask about because I'd never heard of it before, which was the intensity assessment tool. And that sounded interesting as a way. I mean, everyone in caregiving would be able to say, I'm under stress, but it seems like this tool is helpful to figure out, am I seriously under stress and in big trouble here? Or is this doable where I am?
Right. The intensity assessment tool is outstanding. It has been created and is maintained by an organization called archangels.me. That's where you can find them online. That's where you can find the tool online. They are an organization entirely devoted to advocating for family caregivers, from working with healthcare organizations to recognize family caregivers, working with employers, just the whole deal. They are all about family caregiving. And they developed this assessment tool. You do it on your phone. It takes all of 10 minutes to answer the questions. And what I like about it, akin to the leadership, element of this, is it's an objective outside assessment, which leaders do all the time, right? You hire a consultant, you do a needs assessment, you do an employee survey, satisfaction survey, all these things we do to get ourselves perspective and some objectivity on what the situation is. And that's exactly what this tool does. You answer some questions about what's currently going on, and it will present you with a score and an indication in that score as to whether, yeah, you're stressed, but you're doing it. You're okay. Um, you're stressed and it's getting a little rough, to kind of red zone, dude, if you thought you were messed up, you're right. It's crazy. It's out of control. It's a lot. And that's incredibly validating. To get that from an assessment that has been designed by experts in this field who look at caregivers and caregiving all the time. And it's not a one and done thing, right? Your situation changes. So you can go on it. You might have assessed it last week, and then you're like, wow, a bunch of stuff has happened. And you do it again to kind of, see what's changed and see if your feelings of overwhelm are corresponding with what this objective instrument says you probably, where you probably are.
Mm. So I just found that really helpful, just something I'd never heard of before, but something nice for people to know about. So that's archangels.me.
Me.
So I'll put a link to that in the show notes so the
Please
people
do.
can
Yeah, that would be
go
great.
there and find it. And I just want to emphasize there's so much more in the book. You have other tools and resources for people as well. And like you said, some worksheets where you can write things down and go through your own thought process. So that it's extremely just it's practical and
It
helpful
really is.
all the way through. But I wanted to kind of wrap this up by visiting the idea of precious time, which is included in the hospice doctor's widow. And that's, we talked about that the first time we talked about that book, but I wanted to just, I think it's just such a nice way to end. So I wanted to have you tell us about precious time and what that is, because ultimately I think that's the goal of all of this. Part of everyone's vision and mission is to honor precious time. So tell us about that.
Sure. So precious time is a term that Bob, my late husband, coined and used with families when the death was getting close, you know. So we talked about how caregiving, the average is 4.5 years long. That's a long time to be a life-sustaining family caregiver where you are focused on meals and sleep and vitals maybe, or blood sugar, all these, pulse ox, all these things, right? And as you get closer to realizing the vision, at least the first part of the vision of the death of your care recipient, it's really hard to see that, to get out of that routine of meals and to realize that this is this special time. And Bob would call it precious time. Precious time is when you just you be and you with your person and you talk and you say your I love yous and your I'm sorries and your thank yous, because it's not going to go on forever. Um, and you only have one shot, right? At having it go the way, there's no dress rehearsal, having it go the way that it needs to go, and you will carry it with you. Bob used to say, patient's going to be fine. It's the family I worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. Like he was right. It's the loved ones who go on who live with the life and especially the death of their person. So that precious time is the way he would tell patients and families, you need to shift gears because we're coming up on the end. And it's a lovely term. People understand what it means, without, and it doesn't require you to say you're going to die soon, right? Like that's so harsh. But if you say you're into precious time, and this is what we do during precious time. And I do have precious time. I love that precious time became kind of bigger than the hospice doctor's widow in its own way. Barbara Carnes wrote an incredible blog about precious time. I wrote a guest blog for the Good Death blog, and it just got big, really big. And so I created a free download that's on the resources page of my website, called Precious Time. It's an implementation guide for healthcare professionals, because every time I have shared the use of this term with healthcare professionals, they have just eaten it up, loved it, because it's this great way, kind, pretty way to say death is coming, and you won't get a chance to do these things again. So this is because this is precious time. And he'd always put the emphasis on the word precious, for that reason. But anyway, the download is, I think, really great. It kind of tells you about the term. It tells you how to use it, how not to use it. I think I've got 3 or 4 case studies in there, about its effective use, or in one of the case studies is it wasn't used and how ineffective that was, and unfortunate. So, yeah, thank you for asking about precious time. It's
Mm-hmm.
always wonderful to talk about it. Of course, it reminds me of Bob and how wonderful and smart he was. And it's such a great term for all of us to be able to use to help people understand.
It's a beautiful legacy that Bob left for all of us, but it just every time I hear it, it just touches my heart because it's really a perfect phrase, and I just want to share it widely,
Thank you.
because so everyone will have it at hand, because it's a useful term to use for people, for guiding people into how to be present during these these very last beautiful moments. So,
Right, right. And that, for the greater regret than having to be the one to break the news that you are into precious time to both Bob and I, the greater regret was a surviving loved one, especially following an illness where they'd been the caregiver, looking at you and going, I thought we had more time, right? That now
mhm,
that is sadness right there. I thought we had more time is far sadder to me than a death where we recognized precious time, we leaned into it. And I will say, especially since this is about caregivers, precious time doesn't always feel or look, precious. It still involves some really hard physical stuff, some hard stuff to watch in terms of your loved one, sort of body, um, you know, uh, closing down, and it's not, but it's so important, and you will have considerably less regret, um, perhaps even an easier time just focusing on your grief and your love if you go ahead and recognize precious time.
mm. That's really beautiful. So, so I'll mention it again. Your website is jenniferaobrien.com, and people can go there and look under resources and
Yep.
find all the things you have. And for people to get the book, Care Boss, where's the best place to go to purchase it?
Wherever you purchase books is the best place, and that is convenient for you is the best place. So if you're an Amazon person, you can get it there. If you want to go to your local bookstore, they can order it and get it for you there. There is on my website, there's a way to order it directly from the publisher.
So that's all good to know. Well, again, it's such a helpful book. It's a great, these are the Hospice Doctor's Widow and Care Boss, two great books to have side by side because between the two of them, they really cover the needs of a caregiver, especially for someone at the end of life. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming back and talking to me again.
Oh, Karen, it was my pleasure. I mean, I always love talking to you.
Yeah, it's great to catch up, and I'm appreciative of your books and look forward to see what you're creating next.
All right.